Welcome, good morning, or whatever time it is wherever you are. My name is Jo and I am Senior Teacher at Specialist Language Courses, and I'm coming to you today from Brighton in the UK. Please let us know where you are in the comments. So we are OET providers and we are one of the premium preparation providers. We are one of the OET All-Stars. And today I'm going to take you through a letter correction for an OET nursing letter. And I'm going to discuss areas for improvement. I'll do a live correction of the letter, and then we'll talk a little bit about the criteria and how this particular letter did. Please, if you have any comments, please write in the comments below and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Okay, so I am going to put the case notes up on the screen now, and the first thing we'll do is we'll have a little analysis of those and have a look at the task for the letter I'm going to be correcting today. So you may recognize these case notes. They come from the OET website. They're one of the free sample tests there, so you may be familiar with that, and it's the Peter Dunbar case notes. So let's take a quick look at them and see what we're dealing with. So first things first is have a little look at any notes you've got at the top. So you are the nurse in a community health centre and a patient you've been monitoring is moving to another city to live with his daughter. Okay, so nurse at the community centre, monitoring, moving to another city. Their name is Peter Dunbar and they were born in 1932. So let's take a look at the task at the bottom. That's the first thing we should try and do. So what have we got here? You write a letter to the community health nurse in Centerville, outlining the patient's history and requesting ongoing monitoring. And we're writing to the community health nurse at the community health centre. So already we know we're writing from centre to centre, so it's a transfer letter. And we need to give information on relevant history and request ongoing monitoring. So that should help us when we look at what information to include. So let's go to the top. So here we've got information about medication. Okay. And then we've got the treatment records. We have a quick glance at here. We've got diagnosis of diabetes. The wife died. Other bits and bobs. Hospitalized for myocardial infarction. Okay, so we've got quite a long history here. So let's look at the most recent date, and that will give us a clue as to what the main focus should be. So 22nd of January, so that would be probably today. Patient moving to Centerville to live with daughter and her husband, daughter will cook, etc., etc. Patient needs monitoring. So the daughter advises that the patient is resistant to dietary alterations and medication regimen. So we already know now that obviously ongoing monitoring is probably going to be for that. So what else have we got? Still misses or double doses all medication and refuses to reduce salt, sugar, alcohol, fatty food. Okay, so patient continues to require monitoring and encouragement. So we need to request this and we need to inform about this. But let's have a little look at the rest of the case notes and what's in relation to the medication and perhaps his medical conditions that he's got at the moment. So all medication we've got here. So if we're asking the reader to monitor medication, we need to include the medication in the letter. So what have we got? We've got his type 2 diabetes, so he's had that since August. Okay, and he's obviously been recommended a low fat, low sugar, calorie restriction, limited alcohol, and increase of exercise. So he's been recommended to do that. He lives at home with his wife, and his wife manages his dietary requirements. He likes 2 to 3 glasses of wine with meals, but this is September 2017, so quite some time ago. So his wife died in 2017, depressed and grieving. Okay, he was referred back for monitoring and medicating. Okay, so his fasting BSLs, okay, so that indicated that he was non-compliant with his diet, and he is consuming excessive fat, sugar, and alcohol. So we know that he's not compliant with his diet. Okay, and then we've got here, so he was prescribed a few months later with metformin. Okay, so this is his medication that we are talking about here that controls his diabetes. Okay, he cooks for himself, but he's still non-compliant with the diet, and he's now non-compliant with the medication, blaming poor memory. He's unmotivated. Okay, he takes it intermittently. He's been educated regarding the need for it. Okay, so that might be relevant as well. Okay, discuss the strategies of memory aids. Now, I think because he's going to live with his daughter now, who's going to monitor it, perhaps we wouldn't mention that, but you might want to consider it, but we can decide that later. So we're now in June. He was hospitalized. He had a myocardial infarction. Okay. So he's been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. Okay, following it, and commenced on this medication. So I think we need to mention that because it relates to the medication we're asking the reader to monitor. June to August, okay, we don't need to mention all of the details of attending. Okay, walking with a walking stick, yes, perhaps this. Maybe even restricted mobility gives them an over, because that's still true. Non-compliance with diet continues. Now here we discussed alternatives, community-based meal delivery service. Well, we know he's moving in with his daughter now, so that's no longer relevant because the situation has been resolved by him moving with his daughter. Had a respiratory infection 2 weeks ago, amoxicillin. Well, because it's January now, we assume that this is no longer relevant, so we don't need to mention that. He's still only taking intermittently. So we've got a recurring theme here. And again, he's being provided education regarding the importance. So we might want to mention that as well, you know, despite all this education and reinforcing of how important it is, he still continues to take it intermittently. So we've got that written quite a few times, so we might want to consider that when summarizing the case notes, to not repeat it too many times, but perhaps suggest that this has been going on for a long time. So we've got quite a few things here to include. So if we just review the main patient story here. So we've got Mr. Dunbar. He's moving to live with his daughter in Centerville, and he needs monitoring and encouragement for his diet and medication. So he was diagnosed with diabetes in 2016, but since then he's been persistently non-compliant with his diet and with his medication. So with his diet, he consumes high amounts of fat, sugar, and alcohol, and he's resistant to change, and he's non-compliant with his medication, blaming poor memory. He takes his medication intermittently and often double doses. We've got that later on. His medication, so we've mentioned those things. In addition to his diabetes, he was hospitalized for an MI. Following this, he was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation. So then he was commenced on some more medication, and he's been non-compliant with those as well. So we've got a clear picture here. He needs encouragement and monitoring after he moves to Centerville. Okay, so notice here we haven't got the age. We've only got the date of birth. So we might just want to write that rather than waste time calculating the age. Okay, so let's have a little look at the sample letter, a sample student letter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it, correcting and making suggestions as we go. If you do have any questions and comments about it, please write in the comments and we'll do our best to answer you as soon as possible. So when I get my students' letters and when people send letters in for our correction service, this is the kind of thing that we do. We go through, we look at the letter as a whole, we correct all the grammatical errors, and we give feedback on how to improve or why we suggested something particular. So first of all, I'm going to have a look at the letter, and it looks well presented. I think there is the letter layout is correct. You've got here the right format of the address and date. You've got the reference here, and you've got the correct salutation, dear community nurse, and yours sincerely nurse. So I think that's all fine. If you don't know the name of the recipient, you would write the job title if you've got it. So dear community nurse is appropriate. So let's have a little read of the first paragraph. I'm writing regarding Mr. Dunbar, an 87-year-old gentleman who is transferred to your care and requires ongoing monitoring because he's moving to live with his daughter in Centerville. So immediately we can see, well, there's no full stop there. I'm writing regarding Mr. Dunbar, that's fine, an 87-year-old gentleman. I wouldn't say gentleman, it's not really appropriate. It's a little bit old-fashioned, so I would write, say, man. Gentleman is inappropriate. But also I would perhaps suggest not putting the age here. I would actually cut that out here. Why? As I said before, a couple of reasons. We don't want to waste time calculating the age. If it's not given in the case notes, just write the date of birth in the reference. But also, if you calculate it incorrectly, you know, you could get a reduced score for content for writing incorrect information. So I would suggest just putting the date of birth. Excuse me. So I'm writing regarding Mr. Dunbar, who is transferred to your care. So here we've got an error with the tense here. So who is transferred, it should be who is being transferred or who is going to be transferred. It's happening in the future. And care, I would be more specific with the context. Being transferred into your care could be writing a letter to a district nurse. Let's make the reader aware that we know who they are and where they work, and perhaps write your community health centre. Now already the sentence is becoming rather long. We've got, I'm writing where Mr. Dunbar has been transferred to your community health centre. He requires ongoing monitoring because he's moving to live with his daughter. It's quite a lot of information, so I would suggest to end the sentence there and start a new sentence here. So he requires ongoing monitoring because he is moving to live with his daughter in Centerville. Yeah, that's much better. So I would write a comment here to the student. So start a new sentence here so that the information remains clear. Okay. So let's move on. Here we have, he requires ongoing monitoring because he's moving to live with his daughter in Centerville. Now, does he need monitoring because he's going to live with his daughter? Not exactly. I think the meaning here is a little bit skewed. So perhaps we should change it. We could change it to perhaps after moving, because that's when he's going to start, the monitoring will begin for the reader. You know, what we've said here, this suggests moving in with his daughter is the reason for the monitoring, which is not accurate. Yeah, he needs monitoring for his medication and diet compliance. So you might like to add that here. He requires ongoing monitoring of his diet and medication plan. But if you expand on that later, I think ongoing monitoring is specific enough for the beginning. What might be better is to flip it around here though, perhaps, or you could set the context first. So he is moving to live with his daughter, me, and requires ongoing monitoring. Of his medication and diet, perhaps. Okay, so reading that paragraph, I'm writing regarding Mr. Dunbar, who is being transferred to a community health centre. He is moving to live with his daughter in Centreville and requires ongoing monitoring of his medication and diet. Great, so I think there we've got a clear first paragraph, and the purpose is immediately apparent. So let's continue and look at the next paragraph. So Mr. Dunbar has been diagnosed with diabetes in August 2016. So here we have an error with tenses. Because we say in August 2016, we need to use past simple because it's a finished date in the past. So we use was. And I'll write a little note there. Use past simple because this was in 2016, finished past time. Okay. However, the patient is not very compliant. Since his wife died in last year, he was non-compliant with medication. So there's a little bit of repetition going on there. I don't think it's necessary to say it twice. And we shouldn't have the patient. That's not the right one to have here. The patient is too impersonal. You need to use the name or he. And you've got a bit of repetition here. So I would put that repeated in the next sentence. So I suggest cutting this sentence. Okay. Now, since his wife died in last year, no preposition with last year. So since his wife died last year, we need a comma here. Okay, so I might write a little suggestion here. Don't forget commas after time referencing. So after, however, comma, well, any of these what we call discourse markers after since last year, comma, in June 2018, comma, on admission, comma. Okay. So since his wife died last year, he was non-compliant with his medication regimen. So he was non-compliant. Not the correct tense, is the reverse of the previous error. Because we've got since, we're expressing past to present and something which is still true. So he has been non-compliant with his medication. So we'll put a little note here, use present perfect here to describe something which started in the past and continues in the present. We use this tense when we say since and a time. Okay. Okay, so he has been non-compliant with his medication regimen, blaming poor memory. Memory is uncountable. Moreover, he is non-compliant with his diet. He drinks 2 to 3 glasses of wine with meals and seems withdrawn. Well, this is not related to his diet. He drinks 2 to 3 glasses of wine with meals and seems withdrawn. If you remember with the case notes, this was way back before his wife died. So that's not relevant anymore. And it's written in the present, which is incorrect. So this was in the past and no longer relevant, perhaps. And then we've got and seems withdrawn. Now the case notes say he was looking depressed, but it didn't say withdrawn. So I think the student here has made an assumption. So yes, his wife has just died, but withdrawn is not in the case notes. I mean, he might be, but if it's not written there, don't include it in your letter. So don't make assumptions. Yeah, be careful of that. Making connections that aren't stated is a common error of some students. So moreover, he is also non-compliant with his diet. So we might give information about the diet if it's still true. You know, we're giving a history here or a general picture. He was diagnosed with diabetes. Since his wife died, he's been non-compliant with his medication regimen, blaming poor memory, and he is non-compliant with his diet. Perhaps give the specifics here. So give details. And don't use moreover. This is too academic. It's not appropriate for OET letters. It's too formal. So moreover is inappropriate OET letter. If you really feel the need to do a linking expression here for addition, use in addition or additionally. Okay, so moving on with the patient's story. In June 2018, he was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation following infarction, prescribed. Okay, I think that's pretty clear there. He is also, okay, that's talking about his other medication. He takes his medication intermittently. Yes, that's correct. In October 2018, he shows signs of, okay. So have a little think about this. Excuse me. Okay, so here I would mention his name again. Excuse me. Too much talking. So, Mr. Dunbar. Because you haven't mentioned his name for a while, I would mention it again here. Yes. You haven't. You don't have to write it every single time, but I think once in each paragraph is appropriate. Okay, so this is all fine. Okay, emphasize. Okay, I would say Yes, that's okay. But we might want to explain that later. I mean, it's a little bit repetitive. You explain it here intermittently or double doses. So let's have a rethink about that. Or you might say he also takes this medication intermittently, so he's also non-compliant with that. So let's cut that out for the moment. In October, Mr. Number has shown signs of diabetic neuropathy. Okay. It started in October 2018 and it continues now because he now mobilizes with a help of walking stick. So let's change this to started to show signs of, and we'll say why, use past simple because it was, or it started. Because we say in October 2018. Okay. Yeah, okay, that's great. That gives clear. Okay, we discussed the possibility of a meal delivery service and the importance of adherence to the drug regimen. Okay, I mean, that is relevant, but he is now moving to live with his daughter, so that's no longer relevant. So let's just make a note about that. Okay. He's moving to live with his daughter. Okay, great. Go. We could maybe add that a little bit later, so we could add it here. Okay. Okay. In addition, he suffered from respiratory infection 2 weeks ago and is taking amoxicillin. Well, this is actually incorrect. It wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was 2 weeks ago in October. So this was 2 weeks ago in October, not 2 weeks ago today. So it is no longer an issue, no longer relevant. So we'll cut all of that. Okay, the patient is still resistant and non-compliant with his diet and medication, which he takes intermittently or double doses. Okay, so we've got that here and here. I think we can just leave it like that, but we don't like the patient, so we can just put Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Dunbar is still resistant. I would say perhaps still resistant to what? Still resistant to treatment. And perhaps this is where we can put about the importance of adherence to the drug regimen being explained to him. So he is still resistant to treatment despite education on the importance of adherence. And then maybe we can start a new sentence here. He is non-compliant. That's a little slip there. We need to have the adjective, not the noun. So he's non-compliant with his diet and medication, which he takes intermittently or double doses. Now, we've already talked about his diet a little bit before. But let's leave it there. He is non-compliant with his diet and medication, which they do. Okay, he will live with his daughter. Now, you've already mentioned this, and it feels a little strange. It feels a little added on here, so I would cut that out because we've already got it in the first paragraph. So you have already mentioned this, and feels like it has been added as an afterthought. think about cutting it, or moving it to the next paragraph when you talk about what needs to happen once he lives with his daughter. To the next paragraph. Okay, let's have a little look. Okay. Okay, and then we've got, I would appreciate if you could encourage Mr. Dunbar to follow a healthier lifestyle, pour in sugars, and monitor his adherence to the medication. Okay, I would appreciate it if you could encourage Mr. Dunbar. You need to have the correct phrase there. It is a good polite request phrase, but it needs to be grammatically correct. So if you could encourage Mr. Dunbar to follow a healthier lifestyle, poor in sugar, salt and alcohol. It's a little bit judgmental there. Okay, so let's add the note about here. So the correct phrase is, I would appreciate it if you could, or it would be appreciated if you could, plus verb. Okay, so if you're a healthier lifestyle, it's a little bit negative and judgmental, even if it's true. Perhaps we could be more specific to follow his recommended diet. His recommended diet. Okay, and monitor his adherence to the medication. Yeah, I think that's fine. I think if we were going to add about his details about his diet, as I said before, we could add that here. We could give the details here, or we could add it here. So he continues to consume high amounts of fat, sugar, salt and alcohol. We need to give that more prominence. If it's something that's going to be monitored by the nurse, I think we need to show that rather than just putting it in brackets at the end of the request. Okay, so it's all about making the key information easy to find, giving it prominence, yeah, rather than hiding it within details. Okay, so I will make a note about that. So this is a little judgmental. So express this more factually. Okay. And then give details in the second paragraph. Or 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, so that it is not hidden. It is key information as it needs to be monitored and directly relates to the purpose of the letter. Okay. Okay. So lots of positives in this letter, but there are definitely some areas to improve. Okay, let's have a little look at the OET writing criteria. If I just change my screen here. So we've got here, as I'm sure any of you who don't know about the OET writing criteria, you can find this on the OET website, get a PDF version. Basically, you've got the 6 criteria, so the purpose is out of 3 and all the others are out of 7. So let's have a little look and just have a look at how this student did in each of the criterion, and I'll just make a brief comment on what they did well and what needs to be improved, because this is what you should focus on when you're doing your OET writing is, you know, am I fulfilling the criteria? What areas do I need to improve on? And then really work on improving these areas so that you can increase your chances of doing well in the exam. So what we do when we provide writing correction service is we send back the letter, and we also send back writing feedback, so specific comments for each of the criterion. So let's have a little look at what I gave this student. So for purpose, the main purpose of the letter, it's clearly stated at the beginning of the letter. Yeah, we've got a clear purpose. The wording could be slightly changed to make it a bit clearer and perhaps a bit specific, but all the details are explained in the middle of the text and then repeated again, expanded later at the end. So you've got the current situation and the request. So I think it's pretty clear here and pretty easy to find. I think the reader would form a clear idea of what they need to do. Content, again, lots of relevant information has been included here, so the reader has the information they need in order to complete the required action. And there's a clear request for action at the end, so they know exactly what they need to do. The timeline is quite clear, so you've got lots of dates and things like that, but there are some inaccuracies. So you've put about the students put about the respiratory infection 2 weeks ago, which wasn't 2 weeks ago. Even though this information is irrelevant, it's still inaccurately expressed. And there's a few things that are expressed as present, which actually happened a few years ago. And there's also the fact that the medication he takes for his diabetes has not been included. And this is key information. So that should have been included somewhere in the letter so that the reader knows what medication to monitor compliance to. But, you know, a lot of information is relevant and presented accurately, so lots of positives here as well. And I think overall the reader would form a clear idea and a clear picture of the situation. Moving on to conciseness and clarity. So there are some repetitions. So he does mention compliance or lack of compliance quite a lot. Perhaps that could be mentioned less. I mean, it is important, but we don't want it to be very repetitive. And there are also some irrelevancies here. You know, the meal delivery service, the respiratory infection, and it's a little distracting. So think about what the main focus of the letter should be. We're talking about the general history of his non-compliance, the current situation, and of course, what needs to happen. So the summarizing of the case notes is effective in places, but in some places it could be a little more concise and ideas presented a bit more clearly. Genre and style is quite good here. I think there's lots of factual and professional language. I've highlighted quite a lot here. This is all common professional language that would be used for this context. So that's been achieved quite well. There are a few lapses, for example, the patient and healthier lifestyle, but I don't think they are intrusive or distract from the overall style of the letter. So this is done quite well, I think. The next one is organization and layout. So I think, as I said before, the letter layout is appropriate. It's very clearly laid out, and the paragraphs are clear space between them. In terms of how the information's being grouped together, I think it's successful to a certain extent. Yes, they've attempted to organize the information logically. So we've got information about his diabetes and non-compliance to that, or since his wife died, in one paragraph, and then in another we've got his other medical conditions since later on, since June 2018, and then I think you've got later on his current condition, and also of course the requests for action. But a few little adjustments could be made so that key information is easier to find. So for example, the little brackets here where it says poor in sugar, salt and alcohol in the final paragraph, that's kind of hidden. That needs to be given a more prominent position because it's important. So take it out of the brackets, perhaps put it in its own sentence. Language, so there are quite a few errors here with tenses and other things, which are they do cause a little bit of strain, mainly with the tenses, because the reader becomes confused when things happened. So you've got present tenses here that are talking about things that happened in the past, and the reader might be confused as to, is this in the past or is this now? So sometimes this can affect the meaning, so it's important to make sure that you are using the right tenses here. There are a few other errors, like with articles, but these are less intrusive, and I don't think they affect the clarity of the letter too much. But overall, I think it was quite a successful letter, but definitely some areas for improvement, which I would recommend to this student. So I hope you found that very useful. This is a service that we offer to our students in one-to-one and group courses. It's also something that we offer as an OET writing correction service. You can find information about this on our website, so it's specialistlanguagecourses.com. If you were interested in the service, you would receive detailed corrections and comments, as well as writing feedback based on each of the criteria. So I hope you found that useful. Please, if you have any more comments or questions about this, please put them below and we'll do our best to answer you. Also, please follow us on YouTube. We have lots of videos coming out at the moment, helping you with all aspects of the OET. And like us on Facebook as well. We'll be doing lots more things like this in the near future. Okay. I hope you found that very useful. For now, from me in Brighton, have a very good day or evening, and I hope to see you soon. Bye. Bye.